I think everybody pretty much is caught up on the gross injustice that was done to this man. You are his lawyer. You're also, before you were even his lawyer, one of the most knowledgeable people I've known on this stuff. Why? Why go after Michael Flynn?
Well, there were multiple reasons. First of all, Obama hated his guts. He had spoken out when he was head of Obama's Defense Intelligence Agency, testifying truthfully in front of Congress about the rise of ISIS and how Obama had mischaracterized it and it was a huge problem. He was outspoken about the Benghazi incident. He was outspoken about the war in Afghanistan and what a disaster that was. In fact, the Washington Post now has a lengthy interview up that was done of him as part of their Afghanistan papers when he was interviewed by a government agent on that. And he just knows so much about everything that was going wrong during the Obama administration and what needs to be done to fix it. He was going to audit the intel agencies. He knew that they were running billions of dollars in off-book operations, were bloated. Money was being used right and left. He knows that the Office of Net Assessment in the Pentagon hasn't done a net assessment in 10 years or so. And of course, Adam Lovinger wrote a valid whistleblower complaint about that and was, of course, punished for it. I mean, there's one thing after the other. He knows a lot about what's wrong and what's needed to fix it.
He sounds like a man who is getting ready to expose or trying to expose some very, very powerful people, and they took him down. But this is the United States of America. That's not supposed to be able to happen here. Why did it happen here?
Well, it happened because it was very deliberate, very well orchestrated, carefully planned and executed for the most part. And if Donald Trump had not won the election, it still would not have been discovered. And a lot of people had to do a lot of work, including congressmen like Devin Nunes, who started digging in this early on. And a lot of, frankly, Twitter investigators that have been very active in looking for the truth and reading the actual documents to see what was exposed in them. The Inspector General's report, I mean, it's been a multifaceted approach to trying to figure out the truth. And it's taken us a lot of people all these years now, 3 or 4 years, to sort it out and really start exposing it. And of course, Mr. Jensen has done a lot as the U.S. Attorney reviewing the Flynn case. If Attorney General Barr had not appointed him, the government would still be hiding the evidence that shows General Flynn is innocent. In fact, there's even more that we're still waiting on that they're probably using for other investigations, and that might explain why we don't have it yet. And of course, now Judge Sullivan has invited friends of the court to file briefs, and we're getting all kinds of things in under that category, including some rather unusual applications to intervene in the case. And the D.C. Circuit is looking at our writ of mandamus to tell Judge Sullivan what he really has to do is dismiss it, because the government has moved to dismiss it, just like they did in the Ted Stevens case when Eric Holder was Attorney General, and Mr. Judge Sullivan dismissed that right away. He didn't appoint an amicus to investigate that.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but you went right over my head when you said friends of the court and submit. What is a friend of the court? What's a submittal? Explain that for stupid people like me.
Well, we filed what's called a petition for writ of mandamus, which is an emergency motion essentially to the Court of Appeals when a judge has acted without jurisdiction or without authority under the law to do what it is he did. And the appellate court, the D.C. Circuit, has the case now on our petition asking them to tell Judge Sullivan he cannot appoint friends of the court to represent his position, apparently, which is that General Flynn needs to be prosecuted for something. And he cannot invite other people to participate as friends of the court in a criminal case in the district court. There's simply no provision for that in the rules or whatever. And a friend of the court, or amici, as it's called in Latin for the plural, or amicus curiae for the singular, is somebody who has some sort of interest in the case that's allowed to take a position in it for some reason. It happens often in courts of appeals, but not in district courts, and certainly not in district courts in criminal cases, as Judge Sullivan bizarrely invited here, because the government moved to dismiss it.
Sidney, I keep hearing names, obviously, that everybody knows by now. John Brennan, James Comey, James Clapper, all these people. Brennan is the one that always really stood out to me, because even if you can make the argument, which I would not, that Comey was just haplessly going along with some investigation, whoops, fell into it. Brennan was CIA, not FBI. In what universe could he be involved in this in any way? Because that's domestic, right?
Right. And we know that it started with overseas operations. I mean, this was run like a counterintelligence operation against a foreign dictator or something. They seeded information with friendly foreigners and then worked it back into the United States in different ways, luring Papadopoulos to London, luring Carter Page to London, Mifsud, the guy from Italy that had some role in it. I mean, there are a lot of things that were done. And of course, all of it kind of traces back to Brennan and Five Eyes, the multi-agency cooperative group for intelligence sharing among democracies, supposedly. And there's also an organization, a private organization called Calculate or something like that, that's in England, and there are a lot of connections that tie into that.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I obviously don't want you to speak out of turn here, but England, I continue to hear these ties that lead back to England, lead back to the UK in some way. Surely their government wasn't involved in this nasty bit of business in some way, right? This was just private companies over there?
I don't think it was just private companies. I think there was some involvement from MI5 or MI6. And, I hope Mr. Durham, the U.S. attorney from Connecticut, who's investigating the whole thing, figures out how they were involved and how deep it went. But I think there was some official government involvement, because one of the things that's missing from the Flynn case is a letter that was hand-delivered from the British consulate to the incoming national security team on January 10th, I believe, of 2017, completely disavowing Christopher Steele and telling everybody not to pay any attention to anything he said because he wasn't credible. And that letter would have been also delivered to Susan Rice, but nobody can seem to find a copy of it.
What was Susan Rice's role in all this?
I think she was very involved. She did a lot of the unmasking. She orchestrated a lot of it with Mr. Brennan. She had to have been heavily involved. She was in the January 5th meeting in the Oval Office with President Obama, Sally Yates, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, right before they dispatched Comey to New York to brief incoming President Trump on only the salacious aspects of the dossier so they could set the news hook for BuzzFeed and CNN to run with the whole Steele dossier baloney. As national security advisor, she was the one interfacing with General Flynn on the transition. She knew they were hiding stuff from him. Oh, and another big reason they couldn't have him as NSA is because he would have uncovered all of this very quickly. Very quickly. In another 2 weeks, he probably would have uncovered all of their massive abuses of the intelligence surveillance capability of the country, whether it was a legal system or even possibly an illegal system they had set up that Brennan and Clapper and Mueller and all those guys had set up a while back. I mean, they were mining the NSA database as if it was their own personal private encyclopedia of everything they wanted on any American.
Sidney, finally, people do not understand how the law process works for the most part. People are looking at Durham. You brought up Durham. He has this excellent reputation. You're welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, as a man who digs and finds the truth. But people want to know, when are we going to find out something? When is this thing going to end? How long do these things take? Are we going to have something tomorrow? Is it going to be 2 years from now? Set our expectations here.
Well, I certainly share their frustrations. This one seems to have taken an inordinately long time, particularly when compared with the Mueller investigation that started indicting people within weeks after being created. But to Attorney General Barr's credit, and hopefully to Mr. Durham's credit, they are actually going about it the proper way. It's good that there have been no leaks from it. I think that's a really good sign that they are following the law and they're not just flying off to indict people on little process violations, as they call them, but trying to find out what the real crimes were and bring it to light. So I am cautiously optimistic that we should see some indictments within the next couple of months at the outside. Attorney General Barr said that nobody running for president is implicated in it, so it's not affected by the election, at least so far. So that's good, because we all want answers. I mean, it's at least a year now that it's been under investigation, and they should be close to being able to indict some of the appropriate people on the real issues and facts and crimes, and let's get on with it.
Sidney Powell, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse. It's always a pleasure to be on with you. I appreciate all that you do, too.
Hey, thanks so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and like and subscribe. You heard me. Like it, subscribe. You'll get a lot more of it and a lot more of me.